I'm Tony Allen from King's College London, interested in supply chains and here to try to understand the coffee supply chain. The title of today's meeting is Sustainability, and clearly sustainability is something to do with the market and that sort of sustainability, but it's also to do with environmental sustainability and the sustainability of health. In the morning so far, it's been health and environmental sustainability light. The people that actually manage the environmental resources at the beginning, of course, are the growers. And the growers may be represented here, but I don't have a list of attendees, so I'm not sure. But since the farmers or the growers are so important, clearly the links which have been identified by Nespresso are very important, but that's with just perhaps 1% of growers. There's clearly immense power potentially in this room amongst the traders and the processors. Since we saw in the excellent presentation by Tanvi that consumers are supposed to be leading us, do the people in the powerful part of the supply chain that have real big leverage, such as the Nestlés and so on, and the e-coms and others, do they feel actually responsible for human health and environmental health, or is that just something which got rejected out? You showed with the many 10 or 14 things that consumers care about. You did none of those got into your top 5. And so they got ignored. I just wondered if there's some shadow process in the background looking after human health and environmental health in this supply chain.
So in the presentation, I picked on the 5 most important trends affecting coffee consumers and which undermines their purchasing decisions for coffee. And with regards to sustainability benefits, it is secondary. As I mentioned in the table that I showed you in the initial slides, so other factors have a lot more influence in driving their purchase behavior. So things such as taste, which is obviously the #1 factor across the globe, and then you have factors such as pricing and health and naturalness. With regards to sustainability, it is a secondary consideration in comparison to the factors that I just mentioned.
That's official, is it?
Yeah, I mean, in regards to what we see from what's happening in the market and what consumers' perceptions are, generally, sustainability as a factor is important, but it does come secondary to things such as taste and sensory attributes of a product, and also obviously the health benefits of a product.
But is it safe to rely on consumers to lead, or should the people in this room be considering themselves part of the leadership to make sure that we do get good human health and environmental health?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, any new product development will have to be driven by consumer trends and what consumers are looking for. So in the case of, you do have products, obviously, which do have ethical credentials, but just simply only relying on that alone isn't going to be enough. So you do have to have secondary and tertiary attributes as well to be, selling your product.
Thank you. Mr. Executive Director, you would like to add something?
As the Executive Director of the International Coffee Organization, I just wanted to add that we were discussing the consumer side of the economic equation. And for the International Coffee Organization, the most important aspect is the sustainability. And it's the sustainability in economic aspects, in obviously environmental aspects and social aspects. And all the projects committee, the promotion activities, and also all the activities related to the organization in the internal staffing of the organization is devoted entirely to the question of sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe someone out of the audience would like to add something to the answers given on the podium, or any other question, Darimo?
Should I just
or
say?
maybe you.
Yes, of course. The other aspect of this is that Rainforest Alliance and other organisations, Fair Trade and so on, are obviously much more engaged in the whole coffee supply chain nowadays, as with bananas and cocoa and other areas. And of course you can also look at the questions of labour and all sorts of more holistic questions. I think as has been said, there's a greater awareness around this. Consumers, particularly in the West, are looking for more information on labels, full stop, on the products that they are buying, particularly in the more upmarket shops, but even in Aldi and Lidl and so on. Consumers are much more interested in where their product comes from. You've seen this increasingly not only with the more diversified origins of coffee available across the chain in Western shops, and greater appreciation of where that comes from, but also a lot of greener consumers, if you like, which are a larger share of the market, are increasingly aware and do ask the sort of questions you're asking about water and supply chains. So I would say with the growth of the marketing from Rainforest Alliance and Fair Trade and others, this is certainly an ongoing trend.
The more rapid growth in coffee consumption is coming from the developing countries, China, Brazil, etc. What proportion of that is Robusta, do you think?
I think a large amount is Robusta, and that trend will continue. But obviously, as I think the trends will follow broadly the West. It depends on supply, obviously, and demand, and how much is for export in those particular markets. But obviously, the main growth we're seeing is in lower grades. But as the market gets more sophisticated and differentiated, the level of diversification and sophistication will grow as in Western markets. But obviously price is a big determinant here. I mean, as I said in my earlier remarks about the price of a cup of coffee in China compared with the average wage, clearly price will have a major determinant on how that market will grow in the segmentation of that between Robusta and Arabica.
Thank you very much. We still have another 10 minutes for questions.
Wow.
Or remarks. Otherwise, please, you have the floor. Maybe you can use the microphone of a microphone in your region.
Thank you very much. My name is Melanie Rutten-Sülz. I'm the Executive Director of the 4C Association, and I just wanted to add to this perspective also our own observations as being a multi-stakeholder membership platform for sustainable coffee and bringing together producers, traders, roasters, NGOs, and the standard organizations from the private sector to sustainability. And what we see, and adding to the figures on the certifications and the trend from consumers, we also see in the last years a shift really from these consumer and marketing focused initiatives to a real landing of the sustainability discussion in the core business of the big roasters. And this is also being reflected in additional big volumes coming in from the 4C Association's baseline standard, which is verified, so not into these other figures. And I think despite all the success and achievements that the collective of the sustainability standards like Rainforest Alliance, Fair Trade, UTZ and the 4C baseline standard can already look at in the last years, I think there's now also a real turning point for a joint collaborative approach of all the different actors. So the private sector and the public sector joining forces for real farmer-centric approach and impact, looking at especially the issues that cannot be addressed by standards. And Just also to update you or report back, we as the 4C Association, we've already initiated this process. It will be a very open stakeholder process, also in consultation with ICO and other relevant stakeholders, so that we can really get to this global convening platform for sustainable coffee in the end, to make this work for everybody in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that the ICO is excellently positioned to act as this as such a platform to bringing everybody together. There's a question on the left side.
Thank you very much, in Gavrano, Uganda. We see China consuming 1.6 million bags in 2013. How much of that is produced in China? And in the next 10 years, when they're expected to go to more than 10 million bags, what trend do you see in terms of soluble, roast and ground, and these new innovations? Thank you.
Well, I think imports will play a heavy part in China, and that obviously provides opportunities for different origins and going forward more differentiation in that market. Certainly ground, soluble, powder all have a bigger part to play, I think, in China over coming years. But also I think that, as I've already said, the Chinese consumer, particularly in the urban areas, by the next 10 years or even quicker, will be very much aligned to what we're seeing in the West, particularly with the growth of these coffee chains in those countries as well. So I don't see any. I mean, it's very difficult to pluck figures out of the air and say this will be the market share for a particular product, but certainly there are opportunities for more sophisticated growth in China. Yeah.
Thank you. Please.
Mark Hall, we're growers of Robusta coffee in Uganda. We sell Robusta coffee for $1 a pound, and it retails at 20 times, 10 to 30 times more than that perhaps. How do we close that gap? And is fair trade a good feeling for the consumer, but what impact has it had on the farming fraternity?
Well, I can speak from the consumer's perspective. Fair trade and other ethical credentials are becoming increasingly important across food and drink. And of course, coffee is one of the more mature categories with regards to fair trade certification. So, yeah, it is an important consideration. But like I mentioned earlier, of course, in the larger scheme of things, when a consumer goes into the store to buy any brand of coffee, there are other factors which do have a precedence over that, such as, of course, taste and price. But consumers are becoming a lot more ethically conscious and aware, especially about things such as fair trade.
So just commenting on the farmer side, which I think you were asking about as well. I mean, in my view, obviously, farmers would not sign up to these schemes if they didn't feel that there was some tangible benefit from them. So sometimes it's in price, sometimes it's in other side benefits as well, to do with education, to do with health and contracts as well, more secure contracts over coming years. So I think clearly it needs to be a relationship, as has already been said, between the consumer, the trader and the farmer. And those farmers, I mean, there have been farmers, of course, in the past that said they don't get a fair enough bang for their buck from that relationship. I think clearly, as has been said from the initiative suggested over to my left in the last few minutes, if organisations can come together and talk more to each other, then that gap or differential may be closed somewhat over coming years. Thank you.
I want to say some comments about the consumers market in Asia. I think you have not surveyed the consumers' trends about what is consumed in Asia. The expanding coffee market in Asia is based first on what is called the 3-in-1. It's a coffee mix. Coffee mix is a mix of instant coffee with non-dairy creamer and sugar. This product is the entrance gate for the non-coffee connoisseur. They begin by that, and after the development of these emerging countries, they come progressively to coffee shops to know what is fresh coffee. What is the taste of fresh coffee? For those who don't know, it's easier to come with the mild taste, like the 3-in-1. So the biggest share of what is said coffee products in most of emerging countries in Asia, we could say China, Thailand, Indonesia, or anywhere in Asia, is the 3-in-1s. It's 5 times more than fresh coffee. And there is always Nescafe, who produce the main raw material for making this instant mixed coffee. So I invite you to have a look on that product, because the consumers in Asia are more and more numerous. And I think, as it's underlined, Asia is the future of coffee consumption. It's very important on that point. Thank you.
Can I ask, what's the proportion of coffee in a 3-in-1?
Sorry, where did the question come from?
For me, sorry. Well, what is the proportion of coffee in the 3-in-1 that the gentleman is talking about?
Maybe you would like to... Yeah, gentleman, the gentleman from Laos. The question was for you. Okay, so I take two more questions or remarks. One behind. No. Okay, you go ahead.
Let's try that again. Sorry about that. First off, I'd like to thank the Executive Director for convening this session, and I think it's remarkable to see the breadth of conversation across a topic that deserves as much consideration as it's gotten. I'd like to shed a little bit of light on a couple of issues here. In terms of the consumer's perception of sustainability, I can speak to the U.S. market. Consumers in the U.S. indicate that some fraction less than 20% are aware of certifications or other schemes that would promote sustainability, with fair trade having about a 15% driver in consumer decision making, and organic leading the pack with about an 18% driver in consumer decision making. Conversely, we are a trade association. Our membership, the entirety of our membership, are people involved in the coffee trade, and for them, 75% report that an active program on developing programs around sustainable value chains are the single most important activity that our trade association can undertake. And it speaks volumes to the fact that in terms of sustainability from all its aspects, whether they be economic, environmental, or social, in the coffee industry, the industry leads that charge, not the consumer. And my hat's off to those forward-looking companies like Nespresso in particular, and many others, frankly, who have taken a real concern for the sustainable value chain that makes up their livelihood from the beginning from the inception of production on through the delivery of the product, and started to look very closely at what those drivers are and how we might form a more sustainable value chain. I think it's incumbent on all the institutional partners, such as ICO and trade associations and government partners throughout the world, to make sure that we can keep that focus high, regardless of the consumer's perception of its value, because we know that ultimately for all of us, a sustainable value chain is what keeps us alive and functioning and in business. And this is one manifestation. This activity today is one manifestation of many around the world that are taking that concern and bringing it to the forefront. So, for your own peace of mind, you should know that that the industry has a tremendous amount of concern about this, although it may not be so clear in the morning session. I presume that you'll see some additional evidence of that in the afternoon. Thank you.